So let me just show you RHiggit Lite then. This is how we start. We have our RHiggit Lite biped set up in edit mode and a mesh that we want to rig. And all we have to do very simply is just start positioning some markers. We'll see that for areas like the foot, we have a little goal marker set up where we mark out the different position points for the areas of the foot, such as the heel, ball, tiptoe, inner and outer edges of the foot and so on. And the whole thing just goes like this, grabbing these markers, moving them around. We have deform helpers and spacers that we position whilst we're setting up. These make it easier for us to get good deformations at tricky areas like shoulders, hips, torsos and so on. Fingers and thumbs can sometimes be a bit tricky, but this setup is manageable enough for them. Also, of course, the fact that the whole rigger is symmetrical makes the entire process a lot quicker and simpler, not least for fingers and hands. There are joints as well for use in the face. These can be used either to give finite control over any face system you choose to use, or can be used with the included morph-based facial rig. Once we've marked and positioned everything, we simply keyframe all items. We disable IK and we run the RHiggit script for the appropriate biped. And that's it. In just a couple of seconds, we have our converted rig. We take all of the bones and we bind them to our new mesh, and like that we are finished. We have hold bones we can position should we need them. You may wonder what's involved in having your mesh ready for RHiggit, and here for RHiggit Lite all we have is a pretty straightforward T-pose and a few separator maps for the leg left and the leg right, a few for the individual fingers, separate head and neck weight maps, and also a couple of additional ones in the face for the eyes, eyelids, and also the lips. But that really is all you need. And straight away after positioning our markers and running RHiggit, we can see that all of our deforms work really nicely. Let's throw them into subpatch, and we can see that things like shoulders behave themselves pretty well and give smooth and decent deforms. And everything in the rig works right off the bat, and everything behaves itself really nicely. Our IK is behaving like it should. Our deforms around areas like the buttocks are working. Plus we've got our little helpers to smush it about, and the quick foot setup is all ready to go, and everything there just works like a dream. Our IK-FK switching is immediately auto-matched for us, of course, allowing us to pose a limb somewhere. We can then key off the goal and the twist together, throw it into IK, and everything stays in place, and we can work on IK mode, and everything here works and deforms together nicely. And that really is it, all there is to setting up RHiggit Lite. And this character gives us a great illustration as well of just how well RHiggit handles deforms. This character is from a piece of anatomical illustration, and as such he has a muscle layer. Don't get too excited, this isn't muscle simulation, this is just illustration. But you can see that his muscle layer fits inside his skin layer. And when he's posed and deformed, of course, his muscle and bones have to match up with what's happening on the skin. We can't have crazy penetrations going on all over the place, even though their topologies are pretty different, as are their polygon densities. But since RHiggit just uses these broad separator maps for a couple of areas on the body, which can be easily copied between the meshes, we find that the two can be deformed by the exact same rig perfectly. In short, RHiggit handles it all for you. It's not just the control rig that you get. All you need are a few simple weight maps, and even the trickiest deforms are automatically set up and taken care of for you, with stable and predictable results. We can see here just a standard cover disc mesh, which is deforming reasonably well with the rig in it. Nothing hugely spectacular going on, but it all works pretty nicely, and all of the functions and controls behave themselves well. Again, when it is coming down to just grabbing a character and rigging and animating it quickly, we can see that even on things like this mesh here, this is downloaded from the force.net. Not a horrible mess of a mesh, but the triangulation would normally make it pretty unfriendly for deforms, but here with RHiggit, everything's coping pretty well. And we're getting about as good a result from the mesh as we could reasonably expect to, whilst everything else works fine on it. And we can also see in RHiggit Lite that the versatility doesn't just go for the way it handles deforms, we've also got it for the main control setup. So for something like an ED 209 here, we can just reconfigure the whole thing by putting the controls where we want them. Everything can bend every way, so the controls will always still work. Now, admittedly, I've just done a very quick job by reassigning some weight maps on Bones here, so he's still deforming a bit funny. You would, of course, normally spend more time and either reconfigure the deform rig or dump it entirely and bring him in as layers and parent him off to the various parts of the control rig as necessary. But what you can see with RHiggit Lite is that the definition of biped can be pretty broad. And even in a situation like this fella here, we have controls to help us out, as the squash and stretch system can, for instance, be used to give us Ed 209's leg extension, making RHiggit a truly versatile system for all sorts of rigging. RHiggit Lite also gives you two different options for how to set up your characters depending on your needs. You have the basic biped here, which features all of the IK and FK and switching and so on. And you have also the raw biped, whose response time is a little bit quicker, and the raw biped has IK legs all the time, FK everything else, and no switching. Otherwise everything works exactly the same, and you should find the raw biped just gives you a quick, simple kind of rig for when you haven't really got the need for all of the additional toys and fancy goodies and controls and other stuff like that. The morphs that you need to model, as you can see, are pretty straightforward and simple. There aren't that many, only a handful to go through. You don't even need to use all of them really, depending on exactly which controls you're wanting. 17 in total for the full face rig, which you then split down using any number of freely available plugins, or manually if you prefer and want absolute control over the left-right splitting.